The old cliché is that the husband is the last one to know when his wife is cheating. These words contain age-old wisdom that pierces the very heart of human relationships. This is probably not just an idle myth or a frivolous observation. Behind every cliché, there is a grain of truth that grows in thousands of stories encountered in real life. If the husband were the first to find out about his wife's infidelity, he could probably do something to prevent the betrayal, either face the truth, destroying the fragile fabric of their shared life, or try to return the elusive threads of love and fidelity. And if he didn't care at all, betrayal would lose its meaning altogether, becoming not betrayal, but an ordinary event in a chain of everyday life, devoid of the emotional response and drama that give it such weight. Don't think that unfaithful spouses are always exposed. The world is full of secrets hidden so deep that they may never come to the surface. A fleeting romance, a passionate infatuation, hidden under the cover of night or behind the veil of everyday routine, can remain in the shadows, carrying its secrets into eternity if circumstances are favorable. But when infidelity becomes not just an accident, but turns into a habitual scenario repeated over and over again, the likelihood of exposure increases with each new meeting and each secret message. Each step on the slippery ice inevitably brings us closer to the moment when the crack becomes too wide to ignore. There are countless ways such mysteries can be solved, and often it does not involve cold-blooded investigation or skillful deduction. Most revelations occur due to pure chance, a fleeting whim of fate, simple bad luck. A telephone call, an overheard conversation, a forgotten item of clothing left in the wrong place, all this turns into links in a chain of exposure. Sometimes old friends or distant acquaintances come into play and suddenly become bearers of destructive truth. They may see something that was not intended for their eyes, or overhear something incriminating. And driven by a sense of duty, curiosity, or sincere pity for the unsuspecting husband, they bring his personal downfall to light, telling him about what was so carefully hidden. This is exactly how everything was revealed to me. That day I was at work, as usual, immersed in the never-ending stream of work in our huge, dimly lit cargo warehouse. The noise of carts, the rumble of falling boxes, and the screams of loaders' drivers formed a familiar background woven into the gray fabric of my working day. The windows, if they could be called that, were narrow rectangular slits right at the ceiling, letting in pitiful strips of light that barely dissipated the darkness of the room. The smell of machine oil and dusty concrete enveloped everything around, as if reminding that this was not a place for the weak or those who dream of silence. It was in this bustling and noisy environment that the bell rang, forcing me to stop for a moment in the middle of the flight between the shelves, where I was just checking another box of goods. The phone in my pocket vibrated insistently, as if refusing to tolerate neglect. I pulled it out and looked at the screen, internal call. The display showed only 4 numbers that were familiar to every employee, indicating a call within the company. However, contrary to usual practice, the voice on the other end of the line did not bother to introduce itself. "Hey man, is that Doug Fuller?" thundered a rough, harsh voice. I instinctively frowned, feeling irritation creep up my spine. Suppressing a sigh, I answered in the affirmative, mechanically wiping the sweat from my forehead that had appeared from the heat raining in the warehouse. There was a pause for a second, and I heard a noise on the line, as if the caller was in a noisy place, maybe at the coffee machine, where workers always gather. Then he spoke again, and his words hit me like a blow to the back of my head, rendering me unable to move. "Hey dude, you don't know me, but some guys from work are having sex with your wife and are planning on having fun with her at the Christmas party." The words were simple, spoken in an almost casual tone, as if they were not talking about my destroyed world, but about something as mundane as a weather forecast. At that moment, it seemed to me that even the roar of falling boxes around me suddenly fell silent, as if the entire warehouse stood still, listening to this terrible revelation. My fingers turned white, clutching the phone, which now felt like an icy stone in my hand. My heart beat so loudly that for a second I thought everyone around me could hear it. I froze in place, feeling cold sweat running down my back, and the air in the warehouse suddenly became suffocatingly thick, as if it was completely saturated with the stench and heavy smell of betrayal. Of course, I didn't believe it. Joyce was a faithful and loving wife. I said, "Listen, I don't know who you are, but Joyce would never cheat on me. I think you're wrong." I was about to hang up when he continued, "Your wife has those amazing breasts, right? You know, those protruding breasts that defy gravity and kind of look like torpedoes." I had to admit that he was talking about my wife. She truly had amazing breasts, thin but also prominent. She had to order special bras that supported her magnificent breasts because she was sure that gravity would eventually spoil her unique dignity, turning her into saggy breasts pointing towards the floor. She also did special exercises to strengthen her pectoral muscles and maintain firmness. She had a slightly tight belly, but a perfectly rounded ass that I was crazy about, and probably a lot of other men were too. We were both 40 years old, had 2 teenage daughters, and were looking forward to being alone again so we could travel and have fun together. At least that was our plan before that phone call. The anonymous caller took my silence as a denial of the accusation. "I know it sounds crazy, but check out Mark Williams and Chuck Adams. They're the ones who got me into this. They have a plan to have sex with your wife at the party. There's something else planned, but you'd better find out for yourself." He hung up. I immediately called to speak with Mark, but was told that he was in a meeting with other department heads. I was not surprised that I was not invited there, although I was the head of the cargo transportation and warehousing service. Most other departments took my work for granted and only paid attention to me when there was an urgent need to solve some problem. Since I was in a warehouse and not in the main office, I often used the internet to participate in meetings. I logged in and suddenly found myself in a conference room looking at Mark, Chuck, Bill, and Ted. The monitor screen must have been turned off because they didn't notice that I was connected. The microphone was not turned off, so I could hear everything. Mark was obviously in charge of the meeting. Joyce agreed to the party here in the conference room during the Christmas party. She said she would come here early after the banquet and see everyone, unless Doug could interfere or find out what she was doing. All the guys were rubbing their hands in anticipation. Mark continued, "She has a few more requests. She said last year it was great, but this year she wants some kind of mattress to be more comfortable while we get full use of her." Ted immediately responded that he had an air mattress that he could smuggle in before the party and inflate at the start. The rest planned to carry bottles of water and other things. I barely listened after I heard about last year. I was trying to figure out how Joyce could disappear long enough for them to have sex with her. I remembered that Mark sent me to the warehouse to get some small gift for the general director. I was gone for over an hour, and then when I got back, I was busy organizing other things for the party and couldn't find Joyce. How naive I was. It seems that I didn't even suspect anything when she returned to me to go home together. We probably didn't make love that night because I was too tired from all the activities and a couple of drinks that made me sleepy. Some of their next remarks brought me back to reality. Mark took the floor again. "Joyce also wants us to keep Doug busy. Any ideas?" They began discussing ideas, and again Mark came up with a plan. "I have an idea how to make it so that we can be with Joyce at any time. Why not give Doug some substance at the same time we have sex with her, and make him the centerpiece of our party? We could film him doing this, and then show him the pictures and threaten to post them online if he tries to stop us from being with Joyce at any time." Bill suggested talking to Jerome White, who worked in the mail department. He claimed that Jerome liked to break white guys and would be able to get the necessary substances for me. I already assumed that it would be necessary to somehow get dough out of the way, and it would not be as easy as last year. I've already spoken to Jerome, and he agrees to help. Chuck wanted to know how Bill knew that Jerome likes to do men. Bill looked confused and mumbled before saying that he had heard rumors about it. I remembered this detail for the future. I was going to end my marriage to Joyce, but I wasn't going to let those bastards get away with it either. They continued to discuss how they would have sex with my wife and who else they could join in the fun. Chuck made an unexpected move in the conversation. "What about Lisa Priest? She told me she wanted to have fun with Joyce's amazing breasts. Lisa Priest is an openly gay woman who, according to rumors, had a bedroom in her apartment that was converted into a torture room. Last year, she was almost fired after her new secretary quit her job after a date with Lisa. The only reason Lisa kept her job was because the secretary refused to discuss what happened with HR. Chuck continued, Lisa told me that she wanted Joyce as her slave and that she would love to see her magnificent breasts. Hearing this, I asked myself, when has Lisa seen Joyce's breasts in their natural form? I shook my head. There were so many questions and no immediate answers. Meanwhile, Bill asked another question while I mentally tried to figure it out. I don't want to wait until the Christmas party to have sex with Joyce again. Is there any way we can get Doug to go away for a couple of days so we can have some fun with this prostitute? The others didn't know any immediate ways to get me out of the way for a few days, but they agreed that they too would like to sleep with Joyce before the party and then again at the party itself. The meeting was interrupted when one of the secretaries came and told Bill that an important client was on the line. Bill's final remark as he left the room was that Joyce could satisfy some of the clients and bring them all an extra bonus. I turned off the system and sank heavily into a chair. In just 15 minutes, I went from an unsuspecting husband with a loving and faithful wife to a cuckold whose wife turned out to be a woman of easy virtue. Moreover, apparently, she had been cheating on me for quite some time. I tried to find at least something that could make me suspicious of my wife's infidelity in all our 15 years of marriage. Since we started dating in college, she has always been open and loving with me. From our first date, she was gentle and affectionate. We made love on our 5th date, and she seemed happy with any form of intimacy. After the wedding and the birth of children, nothing changed, except that her magnificent breasts became a little thicker due to breastfeeding. I even soundproofed the bedroom so our activities wouldn't disturb our daughters. Even last year, when Joyce cheated on me, I didn't notice any change in our relationship. We discussed our finances, vacations, our girls' boyfriends, our future, and our love for each other, and nothing raised suspicions. But now I knew that she had been cheating on me for at least a year, maybe longer. I found myself faced with the age-old cuckold's dilemma. What to do with this information? Divorce this bitch. Accept the fact that she still loves me, but for some reason she needs to cheat. Stop having sex with her because one day she will bring home some kind of disease. Resign yourself and try to join her adventures. How will I explain her behavior to our 2 daughters? The questions multiplied. How could I afford to hire a private investigator to get all the details? We didn't have much savings. Like most couples, our lives went from paycheck to paycheck. We each had 401k retirement accounts at work and saved for retirement. We also saved money for our daughters, Amy and Jamie, to attend college. We had some equity built up in the house, but we were thinking about building a pool in the yard, and that money had to go toward that. If we get divorced, where should I live? From the stories of other men who had gone through divorce, I knew that the wife always gets the lion's share, especially if there are children in the family. I would be forced to pay child support since I earn more than Joyce. I wouldn't have enough money for a new car or a normal apartment. I didn't even know how much it cost to have a good lawyer represent me. What about my job? How could I continue to work at this company, interacting with these assholes on a regular basis, especially if they could compromise me? Where will I find a job at 40 with the same salary as now? God, I had a headache and a feeling of nausea in my throat. Fortunately, the day was drawing to a close. I noted work hours and headed home. On the way, I passed a large park and decided to take a walk. He got out of the car and walked along the paths. Although the weather was cool as it was early December, couples sat on benches completely engrossed in each other. Children played football, men fished by the pond, and some flew kites in the light breeze. There was a peaceful atmosphere around me, which made me even more depressed. It seemed like everyone was happy except me. The walk calmed my stomach a little. It no longer seemed to me that at the slightest excitement I would vomit. But no headache passed, since I didn't have the slightest idea what to do next. I dealt with crises at work, But in my personal life, I liked routine and calm. Soon I had to go home and pretend that everything was fine with our marriage. I had no evidence to accuse Joyce of cheating. If I revealed everything to her now, I would end up on the street without support. I needed to come up with a plan and keep myself safe. I sat down on the bench and started making a mental list. We had several credit cards, but they were always almost maxed out. As I said, we lived from paycheck to paycheck. There was a small savings account, one that our old financial advisor called "put it in and take it out." It was about $1,000, but it was our untouchable emergency stash. The slightest repair to the car or house could completely deplete this account, and it would take us months to save up the money again. Plus, we planned to use the money on Christmas gifts for the girls. I couldn't take them away and deprive my daughters of the holiday. In the event of a divorce, the house would have to be sold. I don't think Joyce or I could afford the mortgage while living apart. The girls loved the house, the neighborhood, and their school. Relocation could be a real disaster for them. But something had to be done. As much as I loved Joyce, she was an unfaithful wife, and for that she needed to be punished somehow. And then there were the men she slept with. At least the ones I knew had to pay for not respecting me and my marriage. Even if Joyce threw herself into their arms, they made a conscious choice to cuckold me. Lisa Priest was a different problem, but she was already walking on thin ice at work. A simple complaint with evidence on my part could have resulted in her being fired without any recommendation. I kept going back and forth between long-term plans and how to behave at home tonight. Maybe drink yourself into oblivion. But if I get drunk and get home, will I reveal everything too soon? Meet Joyce and kick her out of the house? No, she will immediately hire a lawyer and return in a day. Can I pretend that everything is fine? Joyce always reads me like an open book. I don't think I could fool her for even a minute. With the way I was feeling, I couldn't pretend that everything was okay for even a minute. Maybe I could pretend to be sick, fake a short illness or something serious like cancer. When should I have been diagnosed? Until yesterday, I felt great. No, the cancer is gone for now. Maybe later, if necessary, I can use this trick. So all that remains is to imitate the stomach flu. I slowly rose from the wooden bench in the corner of the warehouse, feeling as if the entire weight of the years had suddenly fallen on my shoulders. If anyone could claim that you can grow old literally in a matter of minutes, then I would be a living example of this. Every cell of my body seemed to suddenly lose energy. Vitality flowed out of me, leaving only a shell weighed down by fatigue and pain. My back, which I usually straightened easily, now hurt and did not obey. My joints ached, like an exhausted 60-year-old man, although in the morning I felt like a cheerful and confident 40-year-old man with many more opportunities ahead. I swayed as I stood up and closed my eyes for a moment, trying to gather my thoughts and force my body to obey. The stranger's words swirled in my head, replaying like a broken record, poisoning every breath with poisonous awareness. A sticky lump settled in my stomach that wouldn't go away, making me feel not only physically weak, but also somehow hopelessly broken. Swaying, I took a few hesitant steps towards the exit, where my old car stood in the shadow of the concrete platform. The warehouse gates were open, letting in hot, stuffy air that washed over me in a heavy stream, as if reminding me that the world outside continued to live its normal life, indifferent to my internal collapse. I paused at the door, looking at the silver hood of my car, which sparkled dazzlingly in the sun, as if mocking me with its shine, shouting that everything that seemed stable was now an illusion. Having barely made it to the car, I sat down in the seat feeling as if I had covered a marathon, and not some measly 10 blocks separating the warehouse from my house. The distance, which was usually not even worth mentioning, now seemed endless to me. I froze behind the wheel, clutching the old leather braid with my hands and trying to digest what I heard. Ahead stretched streets flooded with the hot light of the midday sun, houses with curtains fluttering in the wind, trees moving their leaves in their own calm rhythm. But all this was detached, like a scene from another world that suddenly ceased to be meaningful to me. It became stuffy inside the car, but I didn't even think about rolling down the windows. My gaze was glued to the windshield, behind which the landscape floated by, while my mind wandered through its own labyrinth of fear, disappointment, and horror from the realization of new circumstances. I just sat there, as if in a daze, feeling how fatigue was coming in a new wave, making me a prisoner of this endless minute, where past and future merged into a painful present. I slowly drove the last few blocks to our house, as if every minute of the journey was measured with a special weight pressing on my shoulders. The car swayed over the uneven roads, making the usual dull grinding sound that on another day would have forced me to mentally remind myself that it was time to replace the shock absorbers. But today these sounds were only lost in my thoughts, which, like thunderclouds, thickened and hung over my heart. As I turned into the driveway, my eyes fell on the house, but now I looked at it as if through someone else's eyes, as if the place had suddenly become distant and unfamiliar. In front of me lay a one-story, three-bedroom house with a solid brick facade that always gave me a sense of stability and security. The walls were a warm terracotta shade that contrasted nicely with the white window frames, but now the place seemed like a simple structure, devoid of the warmth I used to feel when coming home. The double garage looked the same as always. One half of it was occupied by Joyce's car, sparkling clean, as if personifying her love of order and attentiveness. The other half of the garage, filled with all sorts of boxes, old furniture, and tools, resembled a warehouse hangar that had not seen order for a long time. There were things stored there that we promised ourselves to sort out for years, but never found the time to do so. My old car, shabby in places like a faithful dog, sat outside in the driveway, exposed to the sun and rain, and now seemed especially tired. I exhaled, looking at the familiar facade. The girls, our daughters, were not yet old enough to drive a car, but plans were already spinning in my head. In a couple of years, when they reach this age, I will have to somehow sort out the parking situation. It would be necessary to add at least one vehicle to our small family fleet, but now that thought seemed distant, hardly worthy of reflection in light of what was happening now. The roof of the house, covered with dark tiles, was in good condition, and this comforted me a little. But the edge of the garage doors could use a fresh coat of paint, where peeling white exposed gray metal rusting from the elements. The doors themselves should have been replaced long ago, because they were increasingly sticking and looked like they might break completely the next time I tried to open them. These small imperfections of the house, which I had previously perceived as part of its charm, now seemed more significant to me as symbols of understatement and weariness. The lawn in front of the house was well groomed, as always, but during this winter, the grass seemed dull and withered. Barely turning green at the roots, it seemed to respond to the mood that reigned inside me. The pale flower beds, where flowers bloomed lushly in summer, now looked like faded, tired spots covered with fallen leaves. I wondered what it would be like to sell this house. I mentally began to figure out how much it might be worth on the market, imagining a scenario in which Joyce and the girls moved to a smaller place, perhaps a cozy two-bedroom house or a modest apartment with a balcony, where neither the dam garage nor the drying-out garage could be seen. Lawn. The pool we once dreamed of building was now out of the question. This idea seemed like a naive dream, distant and unrealistic, like a promise that would never come true again. I stopped the car and parked it in front of the house, turning off the engine with a heavy sigh. The silence that suddenly enveloped me after the roar of the engine seemed almost deafening. I sat staring at the front window, but my gaze was distracted, wandering around the empty space. The street in front of the house looked as usual. Vague silhouettes of neighboring houses with neat facades, a couple of trees that had lost their leaves during this cold season, and rare passers-by wrapped in jackets, as if trying to hide from the cold wind. However, I had no time for this everyday picture. One thing was beating in my head: how to get out, find a plausible reason to leave home for a few days, and find space for reflection. I felt like I desperately needed this alone time. I had to gather my thoughts, sort everything out, think about my first steps and build some kind of plan, and then decide what to do next. But coming up with a convincing justification for this turned out to be more difficult than I expected. I couldn't think of anything that sounded plausible, nothing that wouldn't arouse Joyce's suspicion. Family problem. This option was immediately eliminated. My whole family lived nearby, just a few blocks away, and if I tried to use such an excuse, I could instantly be caught in a lie. One call and my whole plan will collapse. Work was no excuse either. My position was clearly assigned to a location, and business trips were not part of her duties at all. Everyone knew that my work took place within the city, and it would be extremely suspicious to invent a sudden assignment or work trip. People in our circle will quickly know if someone is trying to get out of it using such excuses, and Joyce knew my schedules and plans too well. I could pick a fight with Joyce. In theory, this would be the easiest way to leave home and find somewhere to stay for a couple of days. But this idea also seemed untenable. Joyce knew me, read me like an open book. She was too perceptive and would not buy into some artificial outburst of irritation. She would have noticed instantly that I wasn't upset about some petty argument. My nervousness, suppressed emotions, and heavy, involuntarily clenched fists would have given me away right away. Her eyes, clear and attentive, would instantly penetrate into the essence of my lies, depriving me of the opportunity to hide anything. I ran my hand over my face, feeling my fingers tremble with tension. My palm slid over the stubble, which had grown a little since the morning, and I realized that sweat was appearing on my forehead in small drops, despite the cool air in the cabin. The situation was hopeless, and I was trapped in my own failed attempts to think of something that could save my broken and vulnerable state. Inside, the desire flared up to simply disappear, to run away somewhere where no one could find me, but the reality remained inexorably complex. I slowly climbed out of the car, feeling the gravel of the driveway creaking under my feet, each step feeling heavy and exhausting. The evening sky had already begun to be covered with gray clouds, and the light of the lantern in front of the porch illuminated the area with a dim yellow light. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, but the air, saturated with the smell of rotting leaves and the coolness of late autumn, only increased my anxiety. My heart was pounding in my chest, and the feeling of internal cold did not go away. When I finally entered the house, the door clicked softly behind me, and I felt a warm, comfortable feeling enveloping me, reminiscent of the old days when returning home was not accompanied by this endless anxiety. I arrived a little later than usual. The walk in the park took a long time, but not because I wanted to enjoy its delights, but because my legs did not carry me faster, and my thoughts were a heavy burden that did not allow me to concentrate. The light in the house was soft, muted, and the familiar sounds of family life were heard. The quiet clinking of dishes from the kitchen, the rustle of pencils on paper in the living room. Joyce peeked around the kitchen door, smiling at me, her voice a warm greeting that would have made me smile back on another occasion. Her reddish hair was pulled back into a messy bun, and she was wiping her hands on a towel, peeking into the hallway to make sure I had arrived safe and sound. But today her caring gaze could not melt the ice that shackled my soul. "Hey, honey, dinner is almost ready," she said, and I managed a weak smile. In the living room, Amy and Jamie, our girls, sat at the dining table, covered in textbooks and notebooks. Their faces were concentrated, their brows furrowed as they tried to solve complex problems. When they saw me, they raised their heads, their eyes shone with joy, and they both greeted me in unison. Amy tossed a strand of her long blonde hair behind her ear, and Jamie, the youngest, returned to her work with a faint smile. But my heart did not respond to their joy as it did before. There was a lump in my throat, and I barely nodded at them, trying to keep my expression neutral. The warm, inviting aroma of cooking food hung in the air, enveloping everything around. Joyce had always been an excellent cook, and such smells usually made me instantly hungry. Today, the spicy aromas of grilled meat and fresh garlic only intensified the feeling of nausea that had not left me since that phone call. My stomach clenched in a painful spasm, and everything inside me turned upside down. I felt a wave of vomit rise up in my throat, leaving me not a second to think. Clutching my stomach, I stumbled and rushed down the hallway towards the bathroom. The floor in the house, covered with old parquet, echoed under my hasty steps, and my heart beat even faster. I barely managed to slam the door behind me before I knelt in front of the toilet. My stomach muscles twisted, and I vomited what little lunch was left in me. Her eyes were watering from tension, her head was bursting with pain, as if something was pounding inside her with a hot hammer. My lips were burning, sweat was running down my face, salty drops sting my skin. I hated this feeling, I hated vomiting, I hated myself for my weakness, for this helplessness, for the fact that I could not change anything. Slowly, I straightened up, staggering, and looked at my reflection in the foggy mirror. The eyes were red, the face looked tired and haggard. Something painfully clenched inside me, and I really wanted to cry and throw it all out. But I knew I couldn't afford it. The tears remained somewhere deep inside, lost, locked away, along with the despair that I tried to suppress. The girls told Joyce that I didn't look well, and she came into the bathroom while I was washing my face. "Darling, are you feeling bad?" she asked with concern. I shook my head. "I have a terrible headache, and I just threw up. It's probably the flu." She immediately showed concern. "Maybe you should lie down, take off your clothes, and go to bed. I'll make you some soup and bring you something light for your stomach." I just nodded and went to the bedroom. It seems that vomiting can quell the suspicions of even an unfaithful wife. There was not a shadow of suspicion in her behavior or voice. I took off my clothes and climbed into bed. Joyce arrived a few minutes later and placed a container nearby in case I threw up again. She touched my forehead to check if there was a temperature, and making sure that there was none, kissed my forehead and left me alone. My phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. I really didn't want to talk to anyone right now. I tried to rest and think about how I could stop Joyce from continuing to cheat on me. I didn't have any ideas. Even the thought of killing them all flashed through my head, but I didn't want to end up in prison or be killed, and murder would be too quick and easy punishment. I wanted something that would make them all realize the consequences of what they did to me, but still keep them alive. Joyce brought me chicken noodle soup. Usually, when I'm sick, this is the soup I always want. But today, the very thought of him disgusted me. I tried a few spoons for show, so as not to offend her, and then set the plate aside. "Honey, this isn't like your normal flu." "What's the matter?" She immediately noticed. Realizing that I didn't look my usual self, she looked at me with concern. Why couldn't I read it the same way? Maybe then I would have noticed when she first started feeling the urge to cheat on me. I didn't answer. He just moaned quietly, as if in pain. Since my head really hurt, I didn't lie. She kissed my forehead again and left me to rest. This time I took the phone out of my jacket and checked who called. The missed call was from the CEO, Jim Davis. I put on a voicemail. "Doug, this is Jim Davis. Look, I don't know what's going on, but Mark Williams called me this afternoon and asked if I could send you on a business trip for a few days. Do you understand why he might ask for this? Please call me back." Mark clearly wasted no time and immediately tried to get me out of the way so he could have sex with Joyce unhindered. I wondered if they would come to my house to have sex with her in our bed. Have they done this before? Was I now lying on a mattress soaked with their bodily fluids? This thought made me feel sick again. God, how could my life become such a nightmare so quickly? I stood up and closed the bedroom door before calling Jim back. I didn't know if he was involved in my cuckolding story. I assumed no, since he didn't immediately come up with a reason to send me on a business trip so that my colleagues could have sex with my wife with impunity. I decided to carry on the conversation as if he was involved in case it turned out to be true. Jim answered on the second ring. "Hi, Doug. How are you?" "Not very good, Jim. That's why I couldn't answer your call. I came home and felt bad. I had a terrible headache. As for why Mark asked you to send me on a business trip, I have no idea. There are currently no conferences, and I have not heard of any shipping or warehouse issues that would require my departure." That's what I'm talking about. This is extremely strange, and I'm going to look into it. I'm thinking maybe I can come up with some reason for your absence so that Mark will think that everything is going according to plan. If you play a little in public, my security team will be able to figure out what he's up to. The excuse I needed appeared as if by magic. "You know, Jim, this might be a good idea. If I'm here all the time, his plan might fail. If he needs to get me out of the way to accomplish his purpose, then maybe I should let him feel like everything is going right. When does security think the time will be right? I spoke to Dean Charles, and he thinks he can have everything ready by next week. He has already set up surveillance on Mark and tracks every keystroke on his computer. We even install miniature cameras in Mark's office and conference room to record everything he does there. Dean needs a couple of days to make sure everything is working as it should. He paused. So, what reason can I come up with that would be even remotely believable? Of course, I had no idea. We went through several options until we settled on a more or less convincing story. Jim's idea was simple. Why don't I announce that we need to look into logistics centers like Amazon and Walmart to make our process more competitive? I can tell you're off to learn their processes and software. Won't you go crazy with boredom if you stay in a hotel for several days? I chuckled, feeling a little relieved that I had found an ally, even if he didn't know all the details. I think I can handle it. I can sit in a hotel room, order room service, hang out at the bar or by the pool and get a little tan. I can even look up some local entertainment for you, I said with a smile. Jim was a bachelor and regularly appeared at events with various women. He agreed with me and said that he would start organizing tomorrow morning. He'll start spreading rumors that we need to improve the efficiency of the shipping and warehousing department, or my job will be in jeopardy. He was sure that Mark would be happy and confident in the success of his plan. I agreed, knowing that Mark was simply eager to have sex with my wife without fear of me interfering. When we ended our conversation, I was able to eat the cold chicken soup and keep it in my stomach. When Joyce came to check on me, she seemed pleased that I was feeling better. You scared me, Doug. You almost never get sick, but you looked so bad when you got home. Are you feeling better? I nodded. She then asked, Are you feeling well enough to play a little tonight? It's been almost a week since we made love, and I don't like it. I didn't know if I could get aroused, but I knew that she and I wouldn't have many intimate moments like this in the future, so I decided to try to enjoy her body while I could. Mentally, I corrected myself. Now I have to think of her as a woman of easy virtue. I had always liked to think fondly of her body, but now the word disgusted me. She became different for me. Honey, you know that I always want to make love to you, but my abdominal muscles hurt after vomiting. Maybe you want to do it yourself, I suggested. She smiled and nodded. Then she came up and kissed me, promising to give me an unforgettable night. I hoped I could survive this. After the girls finished their homework and wished me a speedy recovery, they went to bed. I almost cried, thinking about how rarely I would see these two most important people in my life. Now my daughters have become everything I value in life, and I may have to leave them with their mother if nothing can be fixed. Joyce returned to the bedroom after putting the girls to bed, but I still couldn't have sex with her. Darling, it seems to me that you are more ill than I thought. Maybe we should wait, she asked with concern. Somehow I was able to. Her concern did not bring me the slightest comfort. For me now, every word she said with love seemed like a lie. I shook my head and said I was just tired, but I enjoyed our sex. She smiled and stood up to go wash herself. Normally I would get up too, but today I just went back to bed and covered myself with a blanket. Joyce gave me a questioning look, but went to the bathroom anyway. When she returned, she quickly kissed me, climbed onto her side of the bed, turned her back to me, and was soon sleeping peacefully. But I could not find the same peace in my sleep. I tried to sleep, but to no avail. Every time I accidentally touched her, I felt like I was getting an electric shock, and I twitched. It wasn't until about 3 o'clock in the morning that I was able to fall into a restless sleep without terrible dreams of others having sex with my wife. The next morning, at 6 o'clock, I woke up to find my unfaithful wife clinging tightly to me in her sleep. Usually her proximity made me happy, but this morning I felt like I was suffocating. I carefully removed her hands from me so I could stand and catch my breath. She woke up and looked at me questioningly. I was gasping for breath as if I was having a seizure and barely said, Looks like I'm still sick. Looks like I'll have to stay home today. Since it was Friday, there were no special large deliveries planned for today. Next week, closer to Christmas, there will be a different conversation. Although our company did not work on a seasonal basis, many clients made large orders during this period and wanted to receive them before the new year. But today I could afford to miss work. Joyce frowned. Darling, you almost never miss work. Maybe you should go see a doctor. You looked terrible last night, and now you're having trouble breathing. Was there really some kind of chemical release at work? I shook my head. No, there was nothing new or unusual at work. Everything is as usual, except for one unpleasant phone call that upset me. Nothing special anymore. She immediately seized on my words. What a nuisance call, dear. I don't know exactly what to think, I lied. It has been hinted to me that there will be changes in the coming weeks that may affect me personally. And Jim Davis called and said that I would need to go on a business trip to study how large logistics centers work. He was unhappy with some of the reports and said things had to improve or I could be demoted or even fired. An expression of shock appeared on her face. But Mark Williams, isn't he your boss, told me you were doing a great job and he had high hopes for you in the future. I laughed. Mark is not my boss. He and I are on the same level in the hierarchy. He may consider himself more important than me only because he works in the main office while I take care of business in the warehouse. By the way, when did you talk to him? She shrugged. He calls sometimes. He says he tries to check in with each manager's family from time to time to see how they are doing. He believes it helps maintain morale. This was news to me. Maybe Mark had a cunning plan to attract the spouses of managers, and so he forced Joyce to become a woman of easy virtue for the company. This would explain a lot if it didn't seem like she was voluntarily participating in these affairs. No, it seemed to me that she was in control of the situation, not Mark. I pretended to be tired and lowered my head, feigning great discomfort, and then climbed back into bed. Joyce hugged me tightly to comfort me, but it didn't help. I turned away from her and sighed heavily. I would have to force myself to let her continue to take care of me, but she already had morning chores. She needed to wake up the girls, get them ready for school, and get ready for work at the law office where she was a secretary. And then a new thought crept into my head. If she is cheating on me with my colleagues, is she really doing the same with one of the colleagues in her company? I almost felt sick again. I called Jim's secretary and told him I was taking a sick leave. She expressed concern and promised to convey the message to Jim. I then contacted my right hand at the warehouse, and she assured me that everything would go according to plan. The girls came into the bedroom to kiss me before school. My heart sank with pain when I realized that in the future I might rarely see them. My daughters were now the most important thing in my life, and the thought that I might lose the right to care for them if everything fell apart tormented me. Joyce came back into the bedroom to kiss me before leaving for work. She was dressed in a business suit, as usual. The outfit was appropriate and decent for her profession, not overly sexy as I would expect from a woman of questionable reputation. Maybe she changed her clothes when she came to work. Or did she organize her adventures at lunchtime? The questions seemed endless. As soon as she left, I stood up and moved to the kitchen, putting on boxers and a robe in case she suddenly returned. I ate hot oatmeal with toast and drank grape juice, which settled my stomach a little. By 10 in the morning, I was sure that Joyce would not return, and I began to act. I forwarded our home phone, yes. We still had a landline to my cell phone, so Joyce would think I was still home if she decided to call. Then I went to the city to take care of a couple of things. My car was paid off in full, and I knew that if it came to divorce, I would only have to have it in my name. I forged Joyce's signature on the title deeds and registered the car in my name only. I told the registration center that we had divorced and the car was left to me. Either they believed me or they were simply too busy to ask for a divorce certificate. I called the companies to take my name off our credit cards, but since I couldn't pay off the outstanding balance, they refused. Then I went to a local electronics store that specializes in miniature spy devices. I only had enough money for 2 cameras with motion and sound sensors. I chose the smallest and most inconspicuous ones. They had a short range, so I had to find somewhere to place the receiver. I also contacted a friend from the police who I wanted to ask for something special. At first, he was not too happy to help, but after I explained why I needed it, he agreed. If my plan works, I will get the satisfaction of revenge, and no one will be physically harmed. He was still worried that this would lead to problems for him, but I promised to protect him, like a journalist protects his sources, even under the threat of prison. When I got home, I installed both cameras. I hid one in the living room, the other in our bedroom. They were activated by movement and sound. I hoped that if something happened in another room, at least the sounds would be recorded. I hid my laptop in a closet in the spare room, ran an extension cord there, and turned off hibernation. When I leave, I will activate it. I could use my work laptop to watch live footage while I'm away. Late in the afternoon, Jim called. He said that everything was ready on his end and that I would need to leave on Sunday afternoon for a business trip. He and the head of security, Dean Charles, were going to find out what Mark Williams was up to. During our conversation, I got the impression that Jim already suspected something was wrong. He mentioned that security had intercepted interesting emails between Mark, Chuck, and Bill. He seemed unsure that Joyce and I didn't have some special arrangement in our marriage, so he didn't say anything directly. We discussed the details of our cooperation, and he said that he had booked a room for me in a 4-star hotel so that I would not be sitting in some dirty motel. I thanked him. I did not pack my things right away, although I had such a desire. I even thought about leaving right now so as not to have to force myself to pretend to be at home, but I forced myself to stay and play the role of a person whose job is in jeopardy. This was a plausible explanation for my poor condition. When Joyce returned home, she was very attentive and caring. I cleaned myself up, showered, and shaved to look better. The girls returned on time, as usual, and asked how I was feeling before going to their room with the music at full volume. Everything in the house seemed normal, just like a few days ago, but I knew it was a lie. Joyce asked if I was feeling better. I told her that my headache was less, but I was getting stressed out at work. She clearly wasn't surprised. I assumed that Mark had already warned her that I would be gone for most of the next week, and they could arrange meetings. I explained to her that I was going to update my resume in case I had to look for a new job. I have never been seriously involved in this since I started working in a warehouse in our company 20 years ago, combining work with study, and then climbed the career ladder. I was very stressed and asked for forgiveness if I was irritable and impatient with her and the girls in the coming days. She said she understood, and we helped each other prepare dinner. There was no sex that night. We wished each other good night, and I forced myself to kiss her lips properly, and we exchanged declarations of love. I hoped that my declaration of love sounded as sincere as hers. Surprisingly, I fell asleep despite the continued acid churning in my stomach. In the morning, I got up at the usual time. I took out my work laptop and started writing my resume. My work computer and personal computer looked very similar, so I didn't think Joyce would notice which one I was working on. I didn't intend to print it, so I didn't need access to a home printer. After the rest of the family woke up, I deliberately started playing card games and board games with the girls. I didn't really care if Joyce joined, but she did. If she thought my behavior was strange, I didn't care. If she had asked, I would have simply said that the thought of losing my job made me realize how important my girls are to me. They grew up and I lost touch with them as they constantly developed new interests. They even started talking about the boys in a positive way. When did boys stop being you and become ah? It was a pleasant day. The girls were informed that I would be gone from Sunday afternoon until Friday. They were upset that they wouldn't see me, but I promised we could Skype if they wanted. We ordered pizza and then watched a couple of movies on Netflix that they had been wanting to watch, with popcorn and soda. It was a great evening that I thought was unique. I was sure that by next week our family would be broken. When the girls went to bed, I took out a bottle of whiskey and made myself a whiskey and Coke. Joyce grabbed a wine cocktail, and we just sat on the couch together and watched another movie, barely talking. I was surprised that Joyce wanted to make love when we got into bed. On Sunday, I got up and announced to my family that I was going to church service at 10 o'clock. We are not regular parishioners, but we go to church quite often. Joyce declined, citing a headache, but Amy and Jamie got dressed and we went. It's a pity that Joyce didn't go, since the sermon was about fidelity. I chuckled to myself as I thought about the irony. My marriage was already doomed, and the topic seemed perfectly timed, even though it went unnoticed by many. Amy looked at me curiously when I smiled, but didn't ask anything. During our short drive home, however, she did ask why I was smiling. Baby, you are still young and see many things in black and white, but the day will come when your view of the world will become more complex, and tests of loyalty are inevitable. Loyalty not only to God or Jesus, but also to your family, your closest friends, perhaps your spouse, or even your employer. And when do you actually become unfaithful? When you don't defend your sister or family when someone says something bad? When does someone speak out against God or Jesus? Or when you flirt with the new boy instead of staying with the guy you're dating? There are always excuses to make infidelity seem acceptable, but is it really so? She was obviously confused. I asked her too many questions for a young girl, but I just wanted her to think. That's all I could do, make my daughters think. I continued, what are the consequences of losing faith in God, sister, family, boyfriend, or employer? Will you lose the trust you had, or worse, lose someone forever and never be able to have a good relationship with them again? Trust is hard to gain and very easy to lose. One wrong word or deed can damage a relationship, making it very difficult to regain lost trust. Sometimes an action or word is so destructive that there is no more trust left. Let's say I decided that you were wrong about something. Even though you are my daughter and we love each other, I could make such a fuss over what I think you did wrong that you would never trust me to believe you were right again. You can say you love me like a daughter should love a father, but you may never want anything to do with me again. Because my actions would destroy trust, and you would begin to doubt my loyalty to you. Now Jamie was listening attentively too. But Dad, you wouldn't do that to us, would you? No, honey, I won't do this on purpose, but that's where the gray comes in. What if I do this unintentionally? What if I'm talking to my mother, for example, and you hear me say that I don't think you're smart enough to graduate from school and live a good life, and that I think you'll get pregnant, drop out of school, and live on benefits? How would you feel? Both said they wouldn't like it at all. When I asked how they would feel towards me, they said they would be very sad. I explained that this would be an example of my infidelity. I wouldn't intentionally cause pain, but pain would still be caused. It could even destroy our family. Amy returned to the sermon. But why did you smile when the pastor talked about faithfulness? Baby, I was thinking about how many times I saw examples of infidelity, big and small, and how the people guilty of it always tried to justify themselves by claiming that they never wanted to hurt anyone, even when they were intentionally being unfaithful. This is a lesson so hard to learn and so easy to forget. We pulled up to the house, and I parked outside like I always do. The girls quickly bundled themselves up against the winter wind and ran inside. I locked the car and followed them. I walked into the house just as Joyce was asking how the service went. Her expression was priceless when Amy and Jamie started talking about fidelity. They explained the examples in their own words and said that they hoped no one would ever do anything bad to them. They even talked about trust and how glad they were that they had good parents and that they didn't have to worry about not being able to trust us. My examples seemed to make them realize how a lack of trust and faith had ruined the relationships of many of their friends. Joyce quickly suppressed the look of horror on her face. She tried to change the subject, but the girls were so absorbed in this topic that they did not calm down until we sat down at the table for dinner. I don't often say a prayer, but this time I bowed my head and gave thanks for the food, for my faith, and for my family, and both girls said, Amen. Not surprisingly, Joyce was not supportive. She only ate a couple of bites, then said she had a headache again and went into the bedroom. I told the girls that I hoped I hadn't infected my mother with the same virus I had recently contracted. I myself was in a good mood as never before. Maybe she began to understand what awaits her if the truth comes out. After lunch, I chatted and played games with the girls until I decided it was time to go on a trip. The bedroom was darkened when I walked inside. I turned on the bathroom light so I could see, but so the light wouldn't be in Joyce's eyes so much. I didn't really care, but I had to keep up the facade a little longer. I noticed that she had been crying, but was now sleeping. It seemed that her sleep was restless, as she muttered something in her sleep and sometimes twitched, as if she was having a nightmare. In my eyes, this was fair retribution. I packed my bag and called an Uber driver to take me to the airport. I told Joyce earlier that I didn't want to park my car for long periods of time. We had intended for her and the girls to take me, but now that Joyce wasn't feeling well, that was no longer possible. I woke Joyce to tell her I was leaving. She jumped out of bed and hugged me tightly, as if she didn't want to let go, as if I was leaving forever. She kissed me again and begged me to stay. I didn't know if she felt that guilty or if she would really miss me. I said I was sorry, but I had to go. She started crying again and collapsed on the bed as I turned to leave. I closed the bedroom door and then went into the guest room, turned on the laptop, and made sure that at first glance, nothing would give away my presence in the house. I went downstairs to wait for the driver, kissed the girls goodbye, and asked them to take care of Mom. Being the wonderful daughters they are, they quickly agreed, but then surprised me with the fact that Joyce had already arranged for them to stay with my parents for the next week. I knew why Joyce did it and did not elaborate. The girls said it would be great for them to live with their grandparents, they called them Grams, and still go to school. The announcement of the driver's arrival interrupted our conversation. I kissed them goodbye again and walked out with my bag. The driver dropped me off at the United Terminal, and I walked inside, heading to the nearest car rental counter. I chose a medium gray sedan. I wanted to move around quietly this week. Then I went to a hotel on the other side of town, away from home and work. Jim and I decided that this way I could move around and go about my business with minimal risk of being noticed. I did intend to accomplish some tasks by visiting various companies and learning about their logistics processes. I assumed that nothing would happen on Sunday evening unless Joyce decided to leave the house. It seemed that any gatherings were planned at our house closer to the middle of the week. I sincerely hoped that this would end sooner rather than later. My stomach was still churning from anxiety, and I took both long and short-acting antacids to keep the acids from burning me up inside. I went out briefly to buy a soda and crackers for a snack. I hoped that I could get rid of excess gas, and the crackers would absorb the acid, and I would feel better. I didn't want heavy, hard-to-digest food at all. Checked the surveillance cameras. They worked great. The girls were watching the show on TV, and Joyce was talking on the phone. I focused on her conversation and was disappointed that I could only hear one side hers. Yes, he left. No, not today. The girls are home. Tomorrow they are leaving to visit their grandparents, and then maybe we can meet. Will you be alone? Okay, I like it. Who, Lisa? Do I know her? How does she know about? I guess if you say everything is fine, then so be it. The conversation continued for some time, but I did not hear anything interesting. They might get together on Monday. If so, then everything will end faster. All I could do was wait. All my other plans were put on hold. I let the system record what was happening in my house while I tried to sleep. That night I had nightmares about what I thought might happen in my absence. Despite my rage, my subconscious imagined strange scenes. Sometimes I was present when Joyce cheated on me, and everyone involved laughed at me and pointed out how helpless I was and could not satisfy my wife. All nightmares were accompanied by ridicule and humiliation about my helplessness. Finally, I gave in and sat down to watch the commercials until my eyes started to water. Then I fell into a less restless sleep until the sun rose high in the sky. My immediate plans for Monday were simple: to remain unnoticed. I was going to check on Jim and see what he could tell me. Since I woke up quite late, I decided to skip breakfast and have lunch earlier. Lunch was light, but filling as my stomach was still reacting to stress sometimes. I debated when exactly to intervene, on the first night of their date or until the second. Will there even be a second meeting, or will they settle for one evening and then wait until the Christmas party in a few weeks? I just knew that I wanted to regain my dignity, if not in their eyes, then in my own, by catching them in the act. I checked the video footage. Nothing special, just the usual morning routine. The kids got up, Joyce helped them get ready, and sent them to their grandparents. I guess this will end when I kick that bitch out of my life. I sighed. There are so many changes to come in the near future. I hoped that my daughters and I would get through this painful experience. When everyone left the house, the system shut down. I had the whole day ahead of me to kill time. I did a little of my usual work. Just because I was supposedly on a business trip didn't mean I didn't have ongoing responsibilities. After a couple of hours, I finished and started to get bored again. I ordered dinner in my room. Since there was little chance of running into someone I knew, Jim and I decided that I would keep a low profile. Renting a car and staying here under the company name rather than your own ensured minimal risk of recognition. After all, there were only 5 or 6 people to deceive, not the FBI. I planned to go to the pool every day to get the exercise I needed. I had a little belly and swimming would do me good. This is one of the reasons why we were going to build a pool in the yard, but I think now it will remain just a dream. If Joyce gets a house after her divorce, I'm definitely not going to build her a pool so her lovers can have fun there. No, I'm not, said the little boy in me. I would rather burn this house down than help her. In fact, I would sell it to spite her as long as it didn't hurt my daughters. I again found myself faced with a painful question: how to punish my unfaithful wife without harming my daughters. If we get divorced, I'll lose. If we stay together and she continues to cheat, I will lose. If I leave the house, I won't have enough money to live normally as most of my income will go towards providing for Joyce and the girls in the house, and again, I will lose out. If I die, the insurance payout will be limited and not enough to put the girls through college, which means they'll lose out too. These thoughts kept spinning around in my head. In all the stories about cheating wives, the husband always got revenge and emerged victorious, taking all the fortune he had. But in my case, this won't work, because I don't have any fortune. If I were as rich as Bill Gates, maybe I would have a chance, but I'm not him at all. Jim called me late that evening to tell me the news. He reported that he had found something interesting during the investigation of Mark and his company. It turned out there were inconsistencies in expense and travel reports, with some trips appearing more like leisure than work. Jim said he would announce my return on Friday and that I would be ready to go. In my heart, I hoped that I would be able to do this. I checked the camera footage again, but didn't find anything important. Luckily, we didn't have a cat or dog that could accidentally trigger the video recordings. On Thursday evening at 5 o'clock, cameras and microphones recorded activity again. Joyce returned home and went straight to the shower. She turned on music that she liked. I recognized the playlist. It was her playful music, which was supposed to help her get into the right mood. When she came out of the bathroom, she looked simply amazing and extremely seductive. I still regretted that she was doing this for other men and not for me. Then she applied lotion all over her body. The doorbell rang, and I wondered which freak would show up first. My surprise was great when my naked wife let Lisa Priest into the house. They started kissing and then headed to the bedroom. I was dumbfounded again. Until last month, I would never have believed that my loving wife was cheating on me, participating in sex parties, and now it turns out that she loves both men and women. Well, it's time to act. I turned off my laptop, checked out of the hotel, and headed home. The checkout process took about an hour, and I expected that by the time I arrived, all the participants would have already gathered and started their entertainment. I called an Uber to pick me up at the rental car drop-off location, and then the driver took me home. Everything was according to plan. 5 cars were parked in my parking lot and on the curb near the house. I debated whether to cause any damage to these machines, but decided that if their wives wanted a divorce, the damage would only reduce the compensation they could receive. Instead, I decided to simply deflate all the tires. If they are not careful, the tires can be damaged. This little sabotage left 15 psi in each tire. Now it's time to deal with those who were in the house. I quietly opened the front door. I expected them to be in the bedroom, but I didn't want to give away my presence in advance. Indeed, they were in the master bedroom, as the other rooms showed no signs of activity other than scattered clothes. A new idea came to mind. I quickly searched my pants and found the car keys. I decided to make a little surprise by switching the keys between them. If they decide to make a quick getaway, they'll have to spend time sorting out who has whose keys. I thought about urinating on their clothes, but I realized that my bladder was not enough for full-fledged revenge. We had to stick to the plan. I went down to the basement, opened the gun safe, and took out my old 12-gauge shotgun. It was an old pump model that I used for goose hunting. It held 3-inch Magnum cartridges. I had already removed the stopper so I could load 5 rounds instead of the usual 3. The rounds were specially marked and prepared to cause maximum non-lethal damage. I was counting on the surprise effect of my appearance and the noise of the gun to disperse them and instill fear. I sent a message to the group I created earlier. Included in it were the wives of Mark, Chuck, and Ted, as well as Bill's girlfriend. In the message, I invited them to come to my house and see what their men do in the evening work meetings and instead of bowling. I hoped they would arrive in time to catch everything in full swing. I attached the digital video camera to the strap on my chest. I usually used it when I was riding my bike, but today it needed to capture everything that was happening. Now was the moment to break in and ruin the party for Joyce and her friends. I carefully climbed the stairs and approached the bedroom. I stopped in the corridor, out of sight of the participants, because the door was open and I could hear their conversations. I suddenly appeared in the doorway and pulled the bolt of the gun. The sound was incredibly loud in a confined space. At that moment, I saw more than I wanted, and later, while re-watching the recording, I noticed even more details. Mark, Ted, and Bill stood nearby and commented on what was happening until they heard the sound of a gun. I shot. I didn't even realize what I was shouting at that moment until I watched the recording. "You bitch, a woman of easy viability. All of you bastards should die. Get out of my house, you bastard, and get your damn buddies. I'll talk to Jim Davis tomorrow. If I see any of you again, I will not shoot with furry target ammo. If you caught me, you will be regret. Call the police, you bastard, and file a report. I can't wait. Let they take me to jail today so that I will be even more evil tomorrow. Maybe the police will take my guns, but I hid a couple of guns that no one knows about, and I will find you. You bastards thought I was a harmless car, but now you find out that I have friends who won't allow this crap like you. You not only slept with my wife, but you were also planning to get to me forkily. My rage is unlimited. Get out of my house before I kill you." Ted grabbed a pile of clothes and ran out the door. The other 3 idiots followed him, grabbing their things. When they came out, I heard screams outside. I smiled to myself. Looks like someone close to them has already arrived at my house. I would have liked to see what was going on, but I still had 2 women to deal with. I hid the gun in the closet and headed back to the bedroom. I approached Lisa. "You damned woman of easy viability. You came to my house, violated my wife, and had sex with her on my bed. I defended you last year when you fucked up your poor new secretary, and this is how you pay me back. Get your ass off and get out of my house. Take this stupid bitch with you." She tried to shake her head to regain her composure, but her vision was still blurred. I grabbed her by the shoulders and started shaking her, causing her head to swing from side to side. "Can you hear me?" She nodded weakly. "You get the same warning as these bastards. If I see you, I will shoot you. I will not kill you, but I will make you blind, deaf, and you will never be able to have pleasure from sex again. It's clear." She looked at me in fear and nodded again. "Like I already said, take this fool with you. She doesn't live here anymore." Joyce looked up with an expression of bewilderment and fear. You can't be serious. Really, darling? From the moment I found out what you and those scoundrels were doing behind my back, I wondered what I should do with you, the lying traitor. In the end, I decided that I was not going to reward you with a divorce. I don't want you anywhere near my daughters, lest they become infected with your treasonous ways. So I decided that you should leave. I rented a one-room apartment for you in the same building where Lisa lives. You can use it or live with it, I don't care, but you don't live here anymore. When I cool down, I'll talk to you. You will be able to call your daughters and come here only in my presence. That's it. Now you are responsible for yourself. You have a car and a good job. I grabbed her hand and lifted her off the bed. Pushing her forcefully towards Lisa, I gave her my final warning. Until I stop being angry because of what you did to our family and our children, I will warn you like the rest. I will shoot you, make you blind and deaf, and represent you all the pleasures of sex. If I go to prison, I will still find you when I get out. I have a couple of hidden weapons that no one will find. Do you understand? But I'm your wife. You can't do this to me. I love you. I chuckled. A line from the movie suddenly came to mind, and I said it out loud. It's a very strange form of love. She clearly didn't like it, but I just shrugged. Well, I tried. Now get out of my house before I reload my gun and start shooting real bullets. First, I'll shoot you in the chest. Now she realized how seriously angry I was. We had both always admired her breasts, and the thought that I could purposefully mutilate them was unbearable for her. She turned around and, trembling, followed Lisa to the exit. I noticed a bag with various sex toys by the door. It must have belonged to Lisa, so I grabbed her and carried her to the exit. The sight that greeted me was truly satisfying. The men were still trying to pull up their trousers while their wives shouted at them furiously. Bill's girlfriend seemed to have decided to ignore him, but that didn't stop the other wives from attacking him along with their husbands. One of the neighbors, I don't know who exactly, must have called the police because of the noise. Or perhaps that kind-hearted neighbor heard the gunshots and called them. I just knew that there was a crowd of neighbors gathered in front of my house, watching this circus that my marriage had become. Soon a patrol car arrived and 2 police officers got out, trying to figure out what had happened here. I sat on the porch and waited. Looks like they dealt with the noisiest part of the scene first. It was almost comical. The wives did not stop screaming at the almost naked men who were still trying to sort out the mixed-up keys. The men clearly did not want to talk to the police. Each of them cast frightened glances at me, as if afraid that I would take the gun again and shoot them right there. I just smiled and nodded to them. Now I was not just a deceived husband, but an angry sheep ready to attack. Lisa and Joyce tried to sneak into Lisa's car. Alas, one of the wives noticed them, and the entire crowd instantly turned to them. It seems that the wives did not know Lisa and did not know that she was an accomplice. It didn't matter. They immediately attacked both women. Joyce managed to throw on a light long coat from our closet in the hallway, and Lisa somehow put on her blouse and skirt, but this did not help them. The wives grabbed onto them. The police tried to separate the fighters. They did not succeed right away, because it is difficult to separate 3 angry women. A few minutes later, 3 more patrol cars arrived. I wondered if they would also call a special forces unit and a negotiator here. I was surprised that no news crew had yet arrived to cover this drama live. Finally, order was restored. Men were given public indecency tickets for being half-naked on my lawn. Whatever excuses they tried to come up with, the police clearly did not believe them. But in the end, they allowed the men to take their belongings and leave as soon as they could sort out the mixed-up keys. The wives were issued citations for assault, although one officer told me it was likely the district attorney would drop charges against the women with a stern warning. The wives went home to continue the proceedings in a more personal setting. Joyce was allowed to go into the house and pack her things and get fully dressed. Lisa was told to take her to the hospital. Now it was the police's turn to deal with me. It's obvious what happened, and that's probably why they left me for the end. Apparently, none of the participants filed a report against me because I have not yet been handcuffed. I took the camera off my chest before the police started talking to me. I also changed the memory card, leaving only the record starting from the moment I went outside. I was not going to expose myself and then defend myself in court. I don't think the DA would be thrilled to see footage of me shooting people, even with rubber bullets. No, I wasn't going to risk a warning against me. I told the police the main points of the events of the last few days, sticking to the version about my business trip and accidental return home. I admitted that I was furious and lost my temper when I saw what was happening, so I kicked everyone out of the house. I also emphasized that at least Joyce didn't do this while our daughters were home. We all agreed that there was at least some comfort in this. They were finally satisfied, but asked if I was going to work on Friday. It seems they didn't want any escalation of the situation to occur. I told them that I would first call our CEO and talk to him before heading to the office. The police were happy to hear that I didn't usually work in the same building as Joyce. Before leaving, they sternly warned me against any further violence. One of the officers tried to scold me, but almost laughed, remembering how I dealt with the participants. He turned to leave and, with a wink, quietly returned to me one of the spent shell casings found on the bedroom floor. He quietly said that I should get the room in order before anyone else comes back here. It's not very good if the traces of my shots and the rubber cartridges left behind are in plain sight. He then turned and tossed one of the rubber cartridges to his partner. I walked into the house and called my daughters to tell them I would pick them up Friday night and that we needed to talk about their mother. I couldn't explain to them over the phone that Joyce no longer lived with us. This needed to be discussed face to face. Then I found Jerome White's number, which I had previously found in my work files when I was collecting contact information for Bill's wives and girlfriends. Hi, Jerome. This is Doug Fuller. I heard that you want to have fun with me at the Christmas party. I wonder if you're going to kiss me after that. To be continued. Subscribe to the channel and click on the bell so you don't miss the next part of this story. She will be there very soon. The link to the sequel will be in the description of this video below. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.